I'm really glad to be here. I was I was with you briefly on Zoom this morning and had to jump up to teach my summer class, which started today. Um, so there's lots of like energy and ideas and nervous energy like in my body, fueled by the torso-sized mug of coffee. So um, you may recognize this state-of-the-art performance line from one of my favorite object consideration, Grammarly. I say that like I don't like Grammarly, but I don't really have. I have some beef with Grammarly, but mostly fine. But state-of-the-art performance certainly speaks to some of the ways that AI tools are marketed, especially to students, and the ways that students feel kind of persuaded or pressured to use certain tools, maybe without training or real awareness of how they work or what the kind of drawbacks and benefits might be. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alison. I am a faculty member in the College of Arts and Sciences. I teach in the writing program. I teach in the literature department. I teach in the American Studies program. But I also run the Office of Academic Integrity, which handles concerns from faculty about stuff they're seeing in their class. And this brings me so much, especially at this time of year where I hope many of you have finished out your semester and are feeling like, what an awesome off-ramp into this delightful day of thinking about ideas. And I am actually like in this like liminal space of like spring 2025 is not over for me yet. We still have very many actually open academic integrity cases. And there will be potentially some related summer classes. So I haven't yet processed fully what the experience of spring 2025 and the year of 24-25 really looks like. But I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to share with you some of the things that I've seen, because I think they offer you some information and maybe some invisible things or ways for you to think about your materials and your approaches and what kind of things students might be doing that we don't realize. So this is very much coming from a place of like, here's some tentative stuff that I've noticed. These are some trends that are kind of on my mind. Nothing is official. This is very much kind of the beginnings of my thinking about this. Obviously, there's a lot of commentary everywhere about how people, not just students, everybody, use AI. And this is probably hard to see, so I drew some stuff out from it. This is from Harvard Business Review, and it's their annual survey. So they're comparing 24 and 25 general uses of AI. And I'll point out a couple of things about it because there's fun colors, but maybe you can't see the details there. The first most popular use, general use of reported users in their survey for AI was therapy and companionship. And that's jockeyed up to number 1 from number 2 last year in 2024. I thought generating ideas, which was number 1 in 2024, made its way down the list, so not quite as popular a use, which I thought was really interesting. Organizing my life, I thought was an interesting way to frame that. This is their language, not mine. But that was high on the list, number 2 in 2025, not high on the list in 2024. Finding purpose, I don't even know what to do with that one. Enhanced learning is obviously something that I'm concerned with. And so that's sort of like changed positions as well. I feel like this offers us not necessarily conclusions, but maybe some interesting questions to think about how our ideas of what AI is and what it can do, generative AI in the popular space. I feel like this tells you a little bit about how people are thinking about its power, or at least raises some questions about whether and to what extent that's changing. I hear from students a lot, and many of you maybe heard from some students this morning who talked about how they interact or engage with AI. Naz specifically had some comments. I'm not sure how much came through on his video, but I had a conversation a few times with this group of students, and I remember Nas saying that sometimes he used AI because it made him feel like he was able to be more creative. He didn't think of himself as a creative person. Using AI kind of, he felt like enabled his creativity, which I thought was really interesting, especially because he's a young person. For me, looking at a young person who certainly has all the potential in the world to be creative, to label him, I am not a creative person. And so that made me wonder about some of the impact of AI on long term. Obviously, lots of trends in higher ed that probably come across your inbox. Like you work at a university, I'm guessing people forward you all kinds of emails to be like, is this real? Is this as bad as it seems? Or is this what it's like? Or you forward email, around to each other, people in your department. This piece just came out early May, I think. This is from New York Magazine, and it's talking about a couple of different studies about ChatGPT. Everyone is cheating their way through college, which is kind of like, some version of that article title has like crossed my inbox a million times. That's just to contextualize what I can say at this point. Again, unofficially and sort of raw with the presence of spring 2025, to tell you a little bit about some of the trends that I've seen in academic integrity work. So our academic integrity code, you probably know, or you've heard me say before, the text of our code does not explicitly name artificial intelligence, generative AI, machine learning, LLMs, like those labels, that text does not appear in our academic integrity code. Some might say that's a problem, but I think you could also argue that maybe it makes sense if you think about academic integrity as a concept to be learned and a set of skills to be developed, because the code does say things like you can't fabricate, distort, or invent sources. The code does say things like your work should be 100% your own. You have to acknowledge your work when you have to acknowledge works coming from other people or other entities when you use it. When you refer to things that other people have said directly, you need to make sure the words are the same and in the same order, and you need quotation marks around it, right? Our code addresses all of those as potential violations, describes them, and we teach to them. The degree to which generative AI violates our code falls within those categories. And these are the most common things that we've going to turn the translation thing off so everybody can see the screen. These are like in order of most common issue that I've seen this spring. And I will tell you that almost every single case this semester involved AI. Not all of them, but like almost all of them. So again, this is unofficial numbers, but like this was not what our spring 2024 looked like. And it's not what our fall 2025 looks like. In spring 2025, almost every single case we saw had something to do with AI. Again, not all, but many, both. And this, in order of commonality, is what we saw. Fabrication. So we're seeing a lot of cases where faculty are reporting to us, my student submitted this work, they've got a citation in it. I checked the citation and it doesn't exist. Or I checked the citation and it goes to something else totally different. Like what it says in the citation, but what it brings up in the article, there's a disconnect there. That was probably the most common situation. Hallucination, we've seen that actually since these tools became available to the mainstream student audience. Misrepresentation, I've got twice here because I mean it in two different ways. Some of the things that are happening, like the misrepresentation of sort of what people are saying. So there's quotation marks around language, but you can't find that language as is anywhere. And then misrepresentation about ideas. This idea comes from this source. Yeah. No, it doesn't. And within both of those things is a kind of misrepresentation of process that I think our students don't always grasp. So the notion that if you have a references page that you're telling to your reader is that I have read all these sources. And you have a corresponding way of acknowledging that in the text to let your readers know where. But we see stuff on a citations page that isn't referenced in the source, the text at all, or doesn't exist, et cetera. And then the last one is AI is being used in some way and it's not permitted. That was probably the least common, like as a singular category, because it's really hard for us to determine when something is AI generated. And you might say like, oh, if I look at a piece written by AI, I can definitely tell. Well, sometimes you can, definitely. Especially if a student isn't super familiar with prompt engineering or hasn't really played around with it as much, or like they're just trying to sort of figure something out really quickly before something is due. Many of our students do know a decent amount, enough about prompting. Many of them are saying to me and in larger, context of the sort of national space, like I put in, I'm a high school student, I'm a college student, write me an essay about. And it's like, well, that's an element of prompt engineering that our student definitely would not employ 6 to 8 months ago, right? And so knowing that students' familiarity with these tools is growing, and their critical thinking is hopefully growing, but not always at the pace that we would hope, and our teachers can't always respond to that. I think it's useful to remember as faculty and to think as we design future materials that we're going to need to keep changing on this. We're going to need to keep adapting. So in our initial conversations, I think as faculty about AI, we talked about there's got to be something in your syllabus. You got to put some kind of statement, right? And so we definitely had a lot of faculty. We had some faculty who were like, no, thanks. That's hard from my perspective, because when something gets reported to me and there's nothing in a syllabus, it's not like there's no case, but it's challenging. It's more challenging, right? For everybody. But a lot of the faculty who were kind of defining an AI policy were saying something like, it is never okay to use AI. Or it's okay to use AI to check your grammar. Or it's okay to use Grammarly. And I think what's happening at this moment, like what I'm seeing, suggests to me that we need to do more. We need to say more. We need to say more differently to be able to address the issues that I'm seeing on my end. So I've talked a bunch before about how old tools have become new tools because of AI power, and they've changed in nature. Students may or may not recognize that they've changed in nature. Faculty may or may not have noticed they changed in nature. Grammarly is the first one. I've talked a lot about Grammarly. It's part of the reason for my presentation. But Grammarly's been around for so long. It started as a grammar checker that people kind of associated with like a spell check. It would offer suggestions. Students can say yes or no. To be honest, from an academic integrity perspective, I found old Grammarly sort of challenging, because if a user were to go into Grammarly and say, yes, that's fine, just change it. By the end, one of our students this morning said, at what point does it become not mine? If I've accepted blindly all of its solutions, all of its recommendation, at what point is it no longer mine? That's true with old Grammarly, and it's definitely true with new Grammarly. And there are tiers of subscriptions to Grammarly that change the situation for students, because they might not just be getting recommendations for grammar. They might be getting recommendations to change the tone, or they can use it to reorganize. They can shrink text or lengthen text. And if you're a faculty member who's said in your syllabus, it's okay to use Grammarly, and you don't know that Grammarly has those abilities, you may be committing yourself to something you don't want to commit yourself to, right? So that's really hard to faculty members. It's like, oh my God, do I just need to like learn about what every tool is and how it works, and then keep up with how it's updated itself to function with it? So even just saying it, like you can tell how much coffee I've had, but also it's overwhelming in general. The Purdue OWL is another one that I'll mention. For my colleagues in the writing program many of whom have recommended the Purdue OWL as resource, I'm not saying like, oh, these are terrible, don't recommend it or don't use it. But I think the Purdue OWL, which is it's massive like compendium of many kinds of resources, citation and research included. So like, I want to know what MLA style looks like. Okay, cool, I'll go to the Purdue OWL. But now Purdue OWL has a citation tool that's powered by Citation Machine, and that uses AI power. It changes the game a little bit. And if you don't know, as a faculty member, it might change how you give instruction and how you think about the guidelines you want to share. Quillbot is another tool that I hear students talking about a lot for summary purposes. I'm going to put an article into Quillbot or another tool and have it summarize the source. Sometimes we hear that and we'd be like, oh, that seems okay, because then they can check it against their own reading or they can share it and critique it, right? There's all these tools have potentially awesome uses, right? But what I see is the student who's used Quillbot to summarize a reading that they should have done themselves and a summary that they should have written themselves, and a whole lot of learning that they're not getting because they circumvented it by using the tool. A little bit more detail about that. One of the things I feel, a couple of things that I think are revealed about looking at these tools in a little more depth. When I look at some of the things students are doing with Grammarly, I'm like, the way the tool is marketed, it promises efficiency. It makes it easier. It gets you better grades, right? It prioritizes a lot of the things that maybe we're not quite prioritizing in our teaching. But it taps into some of those dispositions that students have that I think are important to address. And then this notion that citation is like an end of itself. I had a conversation with my, I think Hannah is here in the Zoom space, with some librarian colleagues about information literacy and AI literacy and what some of these trends reveal about how students think about research. That the citation is the thing I need. The text that the citation represents may not matter to the student. I got to collect like a little basket. I put all the citations in the basket. And then when the time comes, I sprinkle them around my paper. And the paper is like, what? The paper is something that came out of my brain onto which I've sprinkled citations, right? And I feel like Grammarly plays on all those tendencies. And knowing that for us, I think is really important. Purdue OWL, the one thing I feel like I want to share with you about the kinds of things that Purdue OWL now can do through this component is that you can type in a keyword or a URL. So a lot of citation generators, the way they used to work is like you have to put in all the information. Like you have to say who the author is. You have to say who the journal is. You have to identify the volume and issue number. And we've always said to students, I've always said to students, you can use a citation generator, but like you're going to get a citation as good as what you put into it. If you don't know the difference between the journal and the article title, your citation is going to be wrong, right? With this, you can just put in a URL or you can just type dogs. And here's a list of all these articles about dogs, and you can filter it to be scholarly sources. And you're like, cool, citation generated, sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. And the students never clicked on, never looked at the articles. So this could be like a hallucinated thing. It may not even exist, but it might be. Both are problematic scenarios, right? Because we want the student theoretically to not just gather citations, but also to like read what they represent, right? I'm putting this up there not to like call the library out, and I don't think actually a lot of our students know this exists yet or are using it a lot, but I think it's really important to know that it's here. This is a tool that's available. Like once you do a search in our main library search bar, there's a beta tool. I think it's still in beta form, AI search assistant up at the top. And when you click on that, it takes you to this page where you can put in anything. You can put in keywords, you can put in a question, you can put in a phrase, you can put in a sentence, whatever you want. I typed in academic integrity because like that's the only thing I ever searched for, right? And it says, here are the top 5 articles that you can access through a limited swath, if I have that right, of what we can access through our AU database. When I look at these articles, I'm like, yeah, okay, I mean, it's cool. You click on them, I can access them. That's kind of nice. Then they have this like overview of sources. And that's like a little summary of each one of those sources that are labeled. And they even helpfully put filler words in between the summaries, like moreover and however, which to me is like, why don't you start the thing with an invitation to copy and paste this and submit, right? Obviously, there are uses of this that could be amazing. And I totally see why there are sort of interest in this and why this could really help a lot of people. And I think thinking about this critically has also so much potential. I'm going to talk with my students this summer about this tool before they think about using it. If they ever, usually it's like, oh, I'm Googling it and I have to pay $100 for this scientific article. But thinking more about this, like, what is research question, this has been on my mind a lot. And I mentioned I talked with some librarian colleagues last week and connected sort of information literacy. I feel like it emphasizes some of the information literacy things I was already worried about with our students. This replacement of citation with research, the replacement of sort of, I need sources, I need this sort of transactional thing, I need this amount of thing, versus sort of what we do when we research, what scholarship is, what research is. These are conceptual discussions that I think I would really encourage. Unfortunately, I wish I came in here with like a big toolbox and I could just hand out all the tools to you. A lot of my tools are like annoying. Like, what? Develop the concept of research conversation with my students. Like, that's not as easy as like, here's the hammer, But I think it's useful to know things like how reliant our students are on the systems that they think vet stuff. So everything from our library, like when a student says, I know this is a good source because it came from the library and the librarians vet it, which I just think is funny because I'm imagining like our librarians like reading every single source that the library has access to and being like, yes, no, right? That's not how it works. And so I don't want to inspire cynicism in our students, but I think the skepticism sort of use tools to vet and verify what they're looking at have become more important than ever. And actually, the sort of like thinking like a fact checker has come up in a number of conversations and in some of the research that I spend a lot of time reading from one of my nerd crushes, Sarah Elaine Eden at the University of Calgary, who is doing a lot of really great work about this. Students, I think, often think too that replacing the busy work with AI is useful. And I mean, yes, it is. But I think some of our students this morning got at this too, that like sometimes busy work is necessary work to help us learn how to do something or how something works or what the value of something is, that the struggle kind of matters, the discomfort kind of matters. And if we don't learn how to judge the outputs of these tools, then we're like at the mercy of whatever comes next. One other thing that I wanted to tell you about is harder for me to substantiate, but I think this is happening based on what I've seen. I'm calling it AI laundry because I think our students are using a lot of different generative AI tools all at once. So it's not, and so like I'll have faculty who get in touch with me and they're like, student submitted a paper and I put my prompt into ChatGPT and it spat out pretty much the same thing. And it's like, okay, I understand why that was compelling, but that is not, it's not like doing a Google search and finding a static article that looks just like what students submit, right? The AI tools are constantly changing. It's not a Google search. It's not static. And so it's not a reliable way to judge like was something created using ChatGPT. But our students are like using one tool and taking the output and then putting it in another tool. Summarize this, paraphrase this, put this in different words, and then putting it in another tool, fix the grammar, rearrange the sentences, make it sound smart, and then maybe even putting it through another tool just to like make sure it's fully cleaned up. And this, like, in my mind, I'm like, that's a lot of work. Like, maybe just read the article, But that's, so what can we do about this? I mean, the same thing we can do about everything, which is like engage deeply in these topics. What is research? How does it work? What is help? What is responsible help? What does it look like to get responsible? I think these are all really important things to talk about directly with students and to address directly in materials. The guidelines we have talked about, like when I've done workshops and talked through TTRL and worked with groups of faculty to develop syllabus statements and stuff like that, I mentioned, I feel like they're kind of obsolete at this point because they're too vague. Not obsolete because AI is coming and you have to get on the train or it's going to leave the station, but obsolete as in if you say AI use is never permitted in this class, it's like AI powers in a lot of stuff. It's like really hard now, and it's going to get harder to like divorce what you're doing from any AI power. And our students especially will struggle to recognize when something's powered by AI. Is that problematic or is it not? We do have faculty who are not including AI policies at all on their syllabus or on their assignment. And my encouragement, again, very strongly is please put something on your syllabus and please on every single assignment. And not just the sort of like, don't do this or do this, but in this way, I suggest is not enough. Like, get into the why. Why is it okay to use AI to do this, but not this? Why is it not okay to use AI in this class at all? Be willing to sort of talk with students about what that is. And I think one of the things the students said this morning that I really connected to was like, if you can do that in a way that doesn't feel like assuming the worst of them, or like prejudging that anyone who's talking about AI use, interested in AI, is like cheating. I feel like that stigma is really it is really still stringing around our community. I guess the other thing, that's probably what I would highlight for this slide. A lot of students are using AI for brainstorming, and faculty are saying things like "you can," which is closer. Like that's an example that I think is closer to specific. I would go even more specific than that. And early on in my learning about AI, I think I said, it's not enough to say, no, you can't use ChatGPT or like to use the brand name of a tool, because the tools, like we see with Grammarly, like the tools change in terms of what they can do. So instead, focus on the skills or the functions that they can or can't use AI to perform or do. So like when I was thinking about my syllabus, which I don't, if I seem like a chaotic idea storm right now, like picture me with a syllabus and like all I've learned over the past like year about AI. And I'm kind of like, what do I need to tell my students about AI? And so I thought about this a lot, and I was, thinking, wait, there's a lot that I think could be okay for them to use AI to do. But no, I don't want students to use AI for brainstorming because that's part of what I'm teaching them in my class. I don't want them to use it for outlining because that's part of what I'm teaching them in my class. Research, it's not even real research based on what I'm like, they don't even know that you can get stuff for free at the AU library. I don't want them going to ChatGPT to try to find some fake article or whatever. And so thinking through like each part of your assignment, could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? Is a way to sort of start getting more specific. Well, so this is part of why I said putting this on your syllabus, you can use it for brainstorming, is getting close. But yeah, I want to make the point that like that's what I'm pointing out as the problem, that my idea of brainstorming may not look like yours. And it probably doesn't look like what a student thinks is brainstorming. And obviously, like in the context where a student is saying, in my office, I used it for brainstorming. Sometimes what it means is like, I asked it what it thought about my prompt, and then I copy and pasted what it thought about my prompt into a paper that I submitted with my name on it. Like, that's not brainstorming. And so defining these terms, like for me, brainstorming is like a weird, ugly mess that you get out onto a page that maybe becomes something and maybe doesn't. Most of it probably becomes nothing. But having that conversation and defining those terms with students is really important. So I've kind of alluded to some of my hot tips, which are not like, I'm using the word hot because like they're just out of the oven. Not hot as in like, ooh, they're so cool. But take this with a grain of salt. Get something on your syllabus and each assignment about AI prevention. That's like the tip of the light bulb. No AI use is an obsolete statement to make. I would encourage you to try to be more specific, both on the syllabus and super specific with each assignment. What specific skills or functions can it be used for? So again, like valuing what it can or can't do for students, like what they should or shouldn't be using it to do, versus zeroing in on a particular brand or brand name tool. Get into detail. in connection to your learning outcomes. It's permitted here. Why? It's not permitted there. Why? And then talk about it in a sort of deeper, ethically driven kind of way. As you probably saw this morning, our students, a lot of the students I've talked about are thinking about environmental repercussions of AI use more than almost any other like category of concern. But issues of labor, copyright, privacy, like these are, you can't turn your class, whatever it might be, into an AI class or into a class about privacy or labor or environment. But like any tool, there are trade-offs. And if students don't know what they are and use them blindly, then everybody's got problems. So there's ways, think about ways you can integrate those questions into your work. These are like closer to tools. There's like the closest I can get to like a hammer. I've seen faculty who will ask students to share their research. And by that, I mean like share a Google Doc folder with me full of the PDFs that you reference. Or take a screenshot of the first page of every article you read and put it in a document and send that to me or print that. But don't do printing anymore. So like share actual copies of actual research. So that means the student actually has to open the article at the very least. So those are two like sort of concrete things. Requiring students to write a reflection on their use of AI or any kind of help. I've been sort of pushing this notion of like akin to like a works cited or works consulted page, kind of like a resources page, because we have so many resources at our disposal. And doing something like that is not a kind of metacognitive exercise that could be both instructive and interesting. And then creating opportunities for students to talk about their work. Presentation, for example, some folks want to hear students one-on-one talking about their research. In all of these, my encouragement is not to choose to do them because you're like, I've got to catch some cheaters, or because I don't know what to do about AI and this will help me get around it. But like, these should be pedagogically driven, like driven by what you want to accomplish and what you want to teach in your class. They should kind of fit kind of within your language and your values in your class. I'll have millions more of these as I like sort of process what this year has been. I think useful maybe questions I can offer you. Maybe you're already thinking about this, or maybe you want to like jot these down so you can percolate later. But maybe some good ideas came up for you, or there's some information here that you feel like can inform your teaching. There are things that you feel like you need to know about academic integrity and AI in terms of if you wanted to ask me more questions about, did you see students who did this, or did you have cases about this, or more specific stuff about what we saw in our office? I'm always happy to talk about that and address those things. Or if you feel like, oh, it'd be really cool if there were a presentation about fill in the blank, I would want to know stuff like that, because these experiences are super instructive. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For pushing students making more original work. But my question is it really realistic that you should try chasing students from using AI this way, or we should possibly take a different way of rebuilding our syllabus and curriculum in a way that it just makes students more interactive in lectures, and we can ask them to do some sort of activity that it can just make them do that work, not by asking them to write an essay, make a research paper, especially for kind of subject that does not require that kind of research work. I'm asking that because I'm an adjunct scholar in university, and I'm relatively young, and I was a student a few years ago, so I'm thinking from those directions. Yeah.
That's a great question. Okay, I'll try to summarize the question in case anybody online missed it. So I think your question is about the degree to which our best response to this is like a sort of deeper engagement with like turning our whole syllabus and course planning upside down. And I guess my answer to that is like, yes. Well, it's a harder message for me to roll in here with, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I do think that like we can all benefit from shaking up. It's hard for me to even think about too, because as a faculty member who was not an expert in teaching online, and then the pandemic forced me to learn how to do that. It did not feel good. So it was not comfortable. I did not like it. But I learned a lot, and now I feel like I can do it. But that was, I don't want to use the word traumatic because I feel like that's a little too heavy of word, but like that was really, really hard. And so now for me to feel as a faculty member, wait, put it in the blender again? It feels like a lot. And I think I'm feeling that very acutely because I'm teaching a class and I feel like I put it in the blender and it's really overwhelming. And as a teacher, I feel like, I don't know if you all feel this way, but like, I feel like I have to get things wrong a couple times before I feel like, well, that's cool, you know? And so that's scary for someone who's like been teaching for a really long time to go in and be like, can't wait for this failure to get off the ground so I can learn from it and try again later. But that's sort of how I learn. But I think you're right that there are still ways, even if I'm like, I'm not putting it in the blender. I'm not actually just a small stir. Where I'm saying like, does it have to be done the way I originally designed it? Like, does it have to, for me to achieve my learning goals, does it have to be done that way? Some of it does. I'm teaching a writing class. I don't want to read AI generated stuff, and not like what I want to read is the purpose of it. But like, if I want to teach students about writing, a lot like them generating swaths of text with a tool is not gonna help them reach that goal. But can I acknowledge? Can I address? Can I engage with some of the questions raised by AI? Can I try to incorporate it somewhere in my course? I'm trying. I will try. Yes, I'm trying. So a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Thanks. Yeah, Derek.
A follow-up question. I'd like to get your thoughts and anybody else's. So I teach a course that I've taught for many years. That's a challenging course to teach. It's called iTech 200. Some of you may know this course. And one of the components of that course is to create a emerging technology project. And the idea is to identify, it's sort of a fake consulting project, or a contrived or consulting project where you don't actually have a real client, but that you treat it as if it is. And so the idea is to find a technology that is emerging that can alleviate a problem that a potential client has. And I have been just sort of racking my brain trying to get students to come up with creative ways to brainstorm Betsy's comment, your comment, to come up with really emerging technologies. The library has a subject guide to help with this course to try to find emerging technologies. And this semester in the fall, I encouraged them. I said, let's go through a tool, using, a generative AI tool to look for, prompting it to identify new technologies, maybe Betsy in the brainstorming sort of format. And just like every semester, you have people saying, I want to do Bitcoin, I want to do machine learning, I want to do this. It's the same problems over and over again because they didn't go through the process that I showed them how to come up with more innovative technology. They didn't use the library study guide, bless you. And it sometimes gets a little, it's like, if you would do this, the output would be much better. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like part of that is maybe this came up too this morning where it was sort of like student, I think it was Zoe said, the age of forcing students to read is over. You got to get them to want to read, right? That was Zoe's thought, which I loved. And so then the question is like, yeah. And so maybe your advice for scaffolding is they just don't see why it's necessary yet. I don't know. Maybe show them some like bad stuff and see how they respond to it and see, I'm scaffolding this process so we can get from here to here. And maybe it's sort of like they don't see. I felt that way in the past where I've scaffolded a process, but I haven't been as transparent about why we're doing what we're doing at each phase. And I think you can like swing the pendulum in the other direction too, where they're like, can we stop like meta experiencing this whole thing, you know? But I think, I don't know, that's sort of the first thing in my mind to offer as an idea.
What I keep hearing when people talk about AI is to focus more on the process and not on the outcome as much. And so that does include this sort of meta, but it could be scaffolding, and this can actually be done for someone who wants to not use AI or someone who wants to use AI.
Yeah.
And as long as it's more focused on the process of what you want the students to learn and the tasks involved in that, it still keeps us in that space of students learning.
Yeah.
And so that's the only way. And there's a guy, I think his name is Josh Dietler, but he does this great work on sort of 6 steps of there's stages of using AI with no AI use to full AI use. And he has assignments and he's developed his own chatbot to have his students work with AI and his assignments. So he's really in on this, all in, but at the same time, staying very focused on the student learning process. And the last thing I'll say that is the whole thing about we have to remember the students are often using AI instead of doing the reading. It's not always generating the text.
Right.
And I just have to keep
one of the biggest.
Yeah. And I just have to remind myself this great quote was, yes, kids will read. They stayed up all night reading The Hunger Games. And before that, reading Harry Potter. So we need to think about what we're assigning them to read. When I say read, it can be a podcast. It could be a film.
I want to go online because there are a couple of questions here. The first one, does Canvas have tools to check copying? And I guess one important thing to mention, we do have a Turnitin subscription that's accessible through Canvas. It's Turnitin's main flagship product, which is a matching tool. So if students submit work through Turnitin and you've enabled it, it will match the text to portions of web it's searching. So it doesn't search it doesn't search everything under the sun. It is only able to get into certain systems, or not behind paywalls. But you can have students submit through Turnitin and it will show you the matches. So you might get a percentage. So something like 70% of this document matches to other text. Here's the list of the matches, and you can look and verify it yourself. So like we get reports from faculty who are like, I got a 70% match. And I looked at it and they're not just matching the citations or something like, it's not just the assignment instruction. It's matched to published text, or sometimes it's matched to another student's work from a previous semester and it's been entered into the institutional database. So Turnitin works that way. Turnitin does have an AI detection product. It was part of our subscription for a minute and we disabled it because there were lots of, there's just a variety of kind of abilities of detection tools. And our feeling was using those tools, those numbers that can't be verified, like the way the matching tool can be verified, didn't feel reliable enough for us to use as evidence in a case. We heard from a lot of students and a lot of faculty about that. There's been some studies, but a lot of conversation and chatter about those tools potentially targeting multilingual writers or students with different linguistic backgrounds. I'm trying to keep track of all of the conversations that are coming up about that, but we still have that tool disabled. So we're not using AI. Some faculty are doing that on their own, like they have a subscription of their own, or they're using a free citation or a AI detection tool. But we in our office do not use those results as part of an academic integrity investigation. And connected to another question about, Christy asked, can you please give us a sense of how academic integrity cases involving generative AI use are handled? What are the types of penalties and how does admission of guilt affect the outcome? Real light one, Christy, thanks. That has been so difficult. Many of you have kind of participated in these conversations with me over a long period of learning and struggling with these questions. The issues with academic integrity are not AI use. Like you said, there's nothing in the code that says you can't use AI. We don't prohibit the use of AI by our students. But our code says stuff about original work, doing work yourself, doing work that the professor assumes to be your own. The sort of elevator pitch I talk to students about when I visit with them is like 100% your work, 100% of the time done for this assignment, unless you've noted otherwise. That's like if I had to say, what is the academic integrity work? I mean, like Nas was better. His was academic integrity is how you show up to learn. So good. Put it on a t-shirt. Mine, a little text heavy for a t-shirt, but still 100% your own, 100% of the time done for the assignment. And so when faculty have that concern, they come to us. Sometimes we're encouraging, you do a lot of conversations that don't turn into cases where we're saying, what are you relying on when you say you think this is AI generated? What makes you feel that way? And sometimes I check the sources and they don't exist. And we're like, okay, that's the case. But sometimes it's like, this just doesn't feel like the student. I get that as a teacher that reads a lot of student writing. And it's not that I don't trust a faculty member's reaction, but I can't work with that to build a case. It can become part of a case if we're thinking about like, well, your other work sounds way different, or the level of sophistication you're showing on the discussion board is way different than the level of sophistication I see in class, or like there have to be sort of multiple factors that we're looking at to give us something to work with evidence-wise. We need to be able to say to a student, this is the evidence that was submitted to us that makes us worried that maybe there's a code violation here. And students get a chance to respond to that. They get a chance to say, I didn't use AI. And now that's really complicated because now we have a student saying I didn't use AI, and we have a faculty member say, I am 100% sure that student used AI and they're not supposed to. Those get resolved somehow. Sometimes it's because the evidence is clear and convincing, which the code requires. And sometimes the case is dismissed. And that can be really frustrating for a faculty member who's sort of like, I went through some trouble to report this. It takes some work, it takes some energy. The faculty member, it's hard not to take it personally or to feel like at least icky or bad about it. But we have to sort of work through it. And I think not change the values that, the things about the code that I would like to work on changing. And it's a long process. But one of the things I don't want to change is that we promise students certain rights and kind of due process. I don't want to change that. So sometimes that means you think a student used AI inappropriately, but they're back in your class and you have to grade their work. That's just kind of how it fumbles, cookie-wise. How does admission of guilt affect the outcome? I mean, it does in the sense that we are listening to what students are saying and we care about where they are and what they need, and we want to direct them to different supports and avenues of other work. But if a student is like, I did it, are we like, cool, no sanction? We are not. Part of that is because of what the code requires and what our process has been in keeping things fair and consistent for all students. That's something I'd be interested to hear from our faculty about whether they think something like that should change. And a conversation that's come up a few times before. Sometimes the effect is a failing grade in the course. Sometimes it's a failing grade on the assignment. Sometimes it's a lowered course grade or some combination of that. So the consequences can be severe. I also tell faculty members, like, you should let students, if it's not on your syllabus, if you don't have an academic integrity statement on your syllabus, and let students know that students who violate the academic integrity syllabus, even if it's the first time, you might fail the class. A lot of our students, I feel like this was on syllabi before a couple of years ago, and now students seem more surprised by it. But it's a lot to take. It's not a comfortable outcome. Is it? Appreciate that question.
Can you hear me? Okay. So Alison, thank you for this. And one thing that I think maybe comes up for me when I hear some of the disagreement that happens among faculty on this topic is around Bloom's taxonomy and what is the level of sophistication that we're asking for from students. Because I say this because I've been using citation management software for 20 to 25 years, and it changed my life. I mean, I have thousands and thousands. Everything I've ever cited is in a tool, and some of those I downloaded from the web with a click, and some of them I put in by hand and still have to. So to me, that is, and when I edited journals and still edit journals, faculty, people with PhDs and fancy titles often don't know how to do that. They also often don't know how to use commas. I mean, I learned to diagram sentences, but I'm sure I'm the last generation that learned that because I taught high school English, and I know we did not teach that. So our students do not know how to use commas or semicolons or em dashes or commas. They don't know what a comma splice is, nor do they know how to format an APLA versus MLA. Some do, but to me, those are very low order skills. What we need our students to be able to do is so much higher order. And it's not just about saying this article connects with this article, but it is, as you said, about being able to go in and figure out what is the path of knowledge that led from here to here and what is my contribution. But how do we learn that? We learn it by scaffolding, as Derek is saying. And so if these tools can level up our students' ability to get a handle on sophisticated, hard problems and questions, then to me, that is what we need. If they can cheat on our assignments are garbage. That's what I think. Because I think our assignments have to be complex in the way that the real world is complex. And that means that something that searches the web and spits out patterns that other people have written does not fulfill that assignment. So to me, this is about we have to level up or we're just not good teachers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's right. I mean, certainly there's a difference between using AI to access learning opportunities or to facilitate learning opportunities versus substitute for learning opportunities, right? And I also think there's a relationship between like what some might call the minutia and the bigger picture concept. I mean, I'm thinking about like, well, is it valuable for students to know what a database is? Like what a library database is? It feels like minutia. It's like a definition of a term. It feels like it's not that important, but like, but that idea is sort of like, if we can talk about what is a database, then we can talk about like, what is a journal? What does it mean to subscribe? What does it mean that some people have access and some people don't? Or you have to pay a ton of money, or that all the interfaces now look pretty much the same and somebody owns information. Luckily I have access through AU, and like, so we can I think we can use the sort of the nitty gritty, the details, sort of open up some of those bigger conversations. And I actually agree. I feel like those can be used to do that for us. I feel like that's my like kind of not so hot tip, I guess.
I can just build on that. It's interesting. We've had these conversations now for a couple of years. We've been sort of circling back around some of these. And I just want to come back to something that we talked about earlier. And I think we even talked about it earlier. And it's around equity issues. And so let me just give you a couple of thoughts based on what I'm hearing today. So let's say you are a student at AU who has, family members, extended family members, brother and sister who are scientists, who are PhDs, who are professors, and you just happen to be having a Sunday conversation about X, Y, and Z, and you're a scientist who works at, MITRE is telling you this, and, somebody else. And so it's just family discussion, and you're deepening your knowledge and your understanding of a particular issue compared to the student sitting next to me who's a first generation college student who has nobody else in his or her family that is a scientist. And so now these tools have the ability to level that playing field. I can sit, if I know how to be tutored by these tools, not for, what was the first slide you had, not for personal health or whatever, that was disturbing.
Yeah.
But if I know how to use these tools to let me brainstorm or push ideas and tutor me on something and let me get to learn something a little bit better, to me, those are okay. Those are useful approaches to try to use these tools to level the playing field from an equity perspective.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'll say and not or, because from my perspective, like when I think about the equity issue, I'm like, it is an equity issue that not all students have had access to those conversations. How can we give them those conversations? Because I want students to be able to know how to use tools and strategies to detect. I mean, this is the sort of thing like a fact checker, right? So like those skills and experiences and approaches are not right now accessible to everyone. And I don't necessarily, I think access to the tools matters, but I think access to education about the skills themselves also matters. And so I don't want to replace the teaching of how do I fact check? How do I validate? How do I verify? How do I figure out if this output is garbage? I don't want to replace one with the other. So I would say, yeah, and not or. And seeing there's another question. Oh, hi, Karan. Karan wants to know how to use AI in an accurate manner where it doesn't do the work for you, but helps you learn and understand the material. I think that's cool.
Actually, no, friend. Those are quotes from survey comments from COGOT students this spring. 3 different quotes. Those are student voices.
Oh, sorry, I just started from the bottom. Thanks, Karan.
So I wanted to share that because I think we start to think that our students are all looking for shortcuts and substitutes, and they're not. They're really trying to figure this out, and they really, really need our guidelines and support to do it. They're motivated to learn. They're in college and they're paying a lot of money to be here. And so I really appreciated your slide earlier that said, you can't just say no AI. You can't just say any AI. We have to really engage in a conversation with them, not assuming they're all trying to be cheaters, and assuming good intent, and for us to help them be motivated to do the hard work. So those are 3 different quotes from 3 different students in our spring survey.
Okay. Yeah, I think that also gets to PWR sub-experience where about the hesitancy to engage in conversation sometimes with professors who might be the AI police, I think she said. And so I feel like an openness about these conversations or a willingness to engage without being adversarial seems to be really productive with students that I've spoken to. I think they really want to talk about this. Like the students this morning that you heard from were just like, they were talking all semester, like they wanted to get in front of faculty. Like they were determined. Like I feel like Hannah did not, has been working with them so hard and sort of, I wanted to elevate that, but also to note that those students wanted so badly to talk to faculty about stuff they felt like faculty were missing. You probably could tell. They're really energetic students, really thoughtful. But I do think it reveals something about the kinds of conversations our students really want to have and can have. And so, I mean, I don't know. I find them compelling and exciting and one of the better parts of my day. I'm looking at the time. I know I've gone a little bit over. I don't know what time we started, so great. I want everybody to know, like, if there was a question in the chat that I missed, or if there was a question or something you wanted to talk about that didn't come up that you were really hoping to get out of this, please send me an email on athomas@american.edu. I'm not done with the spring semester, so I'm still very much on campus all the time and available all the time. Our office is working through the summer. So if you have questions or comments, please do get in touch. Thank you so much for your time. I hope the summer is good to all of you.